We met in Salt Lake City about a year ago, and it was a great event there with Ignite. And now you have your best-selling book with Ignite Resilience. So congratulations on that. How does it feel?
No, you know what? It feels great. I wrote in another book called Ignite Your Purpose,
Mm.
and that launch was a success as well. And to do my second book, Ignite Resilience, and to see how well that's done, I'm really excited of what I would say what opportunities that's going to help people see to look at the things within that they need to uh, consider and moving forward in their life.
Very good. Yeah. We're not gonna give spoilers too much, but of course, I'm sure we're gonna cover some parts of the book as well here. But you help professionals to understand their personal operating systems and kind of recalibrate their direction and make more deliberate decisions. So, what does that mean in practice? Like understand, that's a great concept.
Yes, I know. And it took me a while. And I remember when I was trying to understand things, I got as I started to understand things, I noticed things were like an onion. There were
Mm,
so many layers. And then when I started looking at our biology and our system, I realized there's also layers too.
mm,
So I understood the outer stuff, exterior of the world, in school and everything that we're taught with. But I realized that I didn't do enough searching with the understanding. And
mm,
when it comes to understanding, it's more or less like it's like the operational. And operational means I can continue, but the resilience means I can continue without abandoning what is happening inside in me. And I
mm.
think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Understanding made me really reflect of the multiple layers that is within me that I realized that there were many angles like there is in life.
Yeah, true. So when you talk to other, like you're coaching leaders and other professionals, so how do you start working with them with the inner standing?
Well, that starts with just pause and notice, self-reflection.
Mm,
I think a lot of people don't know. Like when I was in the military, they taught me how to operate. They taught me how to compartmentalize. They taught me how to go and move and do things. But I feel like that only lasted so far in my career, not only in my military career, but also me being a professional in what I do now. I realized that there was a point where you can say your body, the bolts, your knees, your body, those inner notifications start popping up. And like
mm,
anything else, like we have a cell phone, right? But sometimes we swipe away those notifications on our cell
mm,
phone all the
mm,
time, swap away. And I felt like I was swapping away those inner notifications. I was telling you, Eric, take care of yourself. Eric, there's something this. It,
mm.
it reminded me like my system was giving me diagnostics that I was ignoring to figure out what my system needed to be rewired.
Yeah. But on the other side, so in military and even in martial arts, you're kind of trained to be the person who focuses and is
Mm-hmm.
just there to do that. And what if you then miss signals that are important? So what will happen to us? Like you're kind of focusing on really understanding what's happening and not to be in kind of autopilot mode. So what are the risks in your opinion that if we kind of go to the autopilot mode and just do as we've done before?
You know what? I love that because that's what I realized a lot. I realized in human behavior, like when we're kids from the ages from 1 to 8, 1 to 10, we're in a theta brainwave, and those are the sponges stage. But sometimes we fall in default settings,
Mm,
and it's usually a certain categories is whether we feel accepted, we feel approval, significance, connection, and depending on where you're brought up or your upbringing, those default settings get stuck, and sometimes we lose sight of that as we get older.
mm,
So sometimes that little person that wasn't able to express themselves or that person that wasn't seeking approval, that comes out as an adult stage.
mm,
And when I talk about the onions, you're talking about childhood, you're talking about military, you're talking about professional, you're talking about either your husband, a father. There's so many angles. And that's why it's very important to understand the many layers and to identify what inner notifications, like diagnostics, that come up.
mm,
And that reminded me to a point where when I was in the military, I was I was in charge of a lot of equipment, a lot of weapon systems, a lot of vehicle systems. And what are we taught in the military? We have to learn that weapon system. We have to learn that vehicle. We have to learn our gear, assembly and disassembly, in, and out
Mm.
to the point to where when you're driving, you can notice something. You know the vehicle, you can notice, you can sense some stuff. Like you become part of that vehicle, you become part of that weapon system, you become part of as a whole to the point to where you can see what is going on, you can feel what's going on. And then that's when I realized, wait a minute, how do I filter out the good, the bad, and the ugly,
Mm.
which takes time to sit and do a self-diagnostic, not the understanding, more of the understanding of the inner layers of the biology
Mm.
to really pinpoint, well, is it I need to upgrade my mindware, my hardware, my operating system, our own systems? Because in business, we have SOPs, we have SWOT analysis, we have systems in place, systems need firmware upgrades. Everything needs an upgrade. Everything has a diagnostic. But what about our system?
Mm.
So that's when it learned that I had to be a teacher and I have to have a relationship of this self.
Mm.
I have to be, this was the vessel. And if the vessel goes on default, if the vessel goes on autopilot, who's controlling the wheel?
Mm.
Who's driving that? You know?
Mm. Yeah, yeah. But do you believe that you first have to kind of go through the pressure and learn about dealing with the pressure before you can kind of start to peeling the onion, or is that the way to go, or how? Yeah.
No, no, no. Thank you for bringing that up because absolutely. Like I remember when I transitioned in the military, it was tough. Like the person I was in the military, when I got out, stuff started surfacing. Self-doubt, sabotage, depression. I started thinking about the military. I started learning the scenarios. And that's what I was talking about. It really took time because I think while I was in the military, you really didn't, me, I really didn't express. I mean, you were fine, you felt good, you just continued on, continued on. But once I left the military, there was no more mission. I
Mm.
had to create my own mission. I had to figure this stuff out. And I realized when I talk about the good and the bad and the ugly, bringing all that wasn't going to make things better for myself.
Mm.
So it takes a lot of pause and noticing and interpreting the raw data. Just because you're interpreting data, I started realizing that I couldn't react right away.
Mm.
I need to figure out who I was and where I'm at now, and then figure out what is my new baseline.
Mm.
And then I realized when I go under pressure, that's going to reveal what I need to be worked on.
Mm.
For example, it's like pressure testing. Like I started noticing that when I came to speak and I was nervous, and I'm like, why am I nervous? Why am I feeling this stuff? Like, I mean, I ran convoys. I've done this.
Mm.
I've had platoons, and I'm like, why do I feel like I'm having trouble speaking? Why do I feel like I'm nervous? Why do I feel like this isn't me? What is going on here? I'm not the same person that I was. And that's when really got me to reflect. And that takes time. And what I
Mm.
do is I get people as a strategist to
Mm.
really sit down with me in a safe spot and not going down the deep trauma. We're trying to figure out what is surfacing,
Mm.
go pinpoint, and then dot and map out and start having a discussion. Because a lot of the times we don't even know what's going on in our life because we have enough time to sit down and find out what all the distortion and clutter that's going on in our mind.
Mm. Yeah. How long does that take, that kind of transformation where you kind of push yourself maybe from kind of from the discomfort to the level that you can actually deliver the way you want to deliver?
That depends on the individual on because we want to create, like for example, if I had a client that he's like, you know what, I feel like I'm confident. Or, well, do you trust yourself? Trust and confidence work hand in hand.
Mm.
And believe it or not, I work with a lot of men that struggle with confidence, or struggle with trust. And it's not, it's they already have that. They just lost sight of that.
Mm.
And when we started talking, well, what is something you want to challenge yourself? He's like, well, I always feel like I want to be a speaker. And I'm like, all right, great. So what are things you can do? He's like, well, I get nervous when I go to networking groups, where I get nervous when I collaborate. Well, all right, let's create a safe, simulative environment to where you go, but before you go, you're already aware of what is going to arise. Because most of the case, people are just like, hey, I'm gonna give myself a pep talk, I'm gonna get going, and I'm just gonna jump in there and see what happens.
Mm.
And then they get the same result, which is the same loop, the same loop, the same loop. Did I say something wrong, or did I feel this? And now I'm in my head. Did I represent myself to my best self? But I'm like, let's hold on here. So we already have a pattern of what usually occurs when you go into those environments. What do you feel? Well, I feel nervous. Well, what is that? Well, I feel fear. So we come up with a playbook, right? We have that little self huddle, right? Bring all our parts together, our mind, our heart, our gut, our nervous system. Everybody's in this big old huddle, right? And then we talk it out like, look, what is going on here? Well, I feel this and this. Well, why this and this and this? Oh, it's because of X, Y, and Z. Oh, why am I thinking of this? All right, because we feel a little bit relieved once we understand what is going on. And I deal with a lot of breaking loops and patterns, because when you look at systems, it's all about recalibrating, refining, evolving. And that's what we are. We're a species that is an ecosystem. We evolve.
Yeah. And in the Ignite Resilience, you write about getting an ice plunge. And I mean, right, as we talked, it's more than 110 degrees in Fahrenheit there where you are living at the moment. So it's going to ice plunge is not normal. But talk us through, like, okay, what did that actually teach you, and how did you push yourself to do that?
Well, you know what? I that was something that occurred after I launched my book, Ignite Your Purpose. I ended up getting reached out someone from Canada, and he actually teaches that training with ice plunges, right, with special forces. And so I helped him out with a few sessions. You know what I mean? He's like, hey, I need some help here. So we had a discussion. I had a couple of coaching calls with him, and he's like, you know what, man? We're doing this thing. We want you to come out. We're doing this ice plunge out there, and we're collaborating with other professionals. And my heart rate is already, what are you doing? And you're going out to a different country. And I'm like, Eric, you're in the military. You traveled all over the world. What's the problem? So it's that I already had that conflict already. But the thing is that I already knew what I've been through, right? And I think me anchoring to that, anchoring to the loss of my brother and a lot of things that occurred with the good and the bad and the ugly, I knew I had to do this for myself, because I knew I was more than capable, because, you know, I served my country. I've done what I needed to do. And I knew that in order for me to stay the operator of this vessel, to be a father, to be a husband, you know, I got 3 boys. I had to figure out how to put it together. So, you know, I'm a real believer in Christ, but also I'm a big believer of providing for my family the best I can provide for them. So I knew I had to pull my head out of my 4 points of contact, you know? So already, I was already nervous, but I told myself, you got this, Eric. You can go over there. So I booked my plane ticket. We went over there. I was nervous. I did it nervous. But the thing is, it was this. I was able to have that self huddle, that self reflection, to where I understand and pause and notice. And I was able to filter out, like, yeah, I know you're nervous, but you did this. I had anchors. I've done this. I've done this. So that's what logic comes in, right? So you start really logically, right? Compartmentalizing the emotion, but you're allowing those emotions to come in, because that's what helps you figure out the data, right? Emotions are chemical. The brain is electrical, right? They work hand in hand. But sometimes we allow ourselves to be overconsumed with the chemical, to where there's too much distortions and the decisions are not in line what you really intended to be. So as I flew over to Canada, and he started explaining the lake that we're going to, cutting the hole in the ice. I think it was about 27 degrees Celsius. I mean, it was negative 27 degrees. And I'm from Arizona, right? So I'm in the heat already know in my mind that, well, I have to adapt. So how am I going to adapt now? I already know that I'm in the heat, right? So I started doing a little bit of training of water, cold water, just to get myself already prepared of what cold might feel. But as we got out there, I started saying, well, what am I going to learn from this? And as I collaborated with the other professionals, like, well, Eric, this is going to be a test where we're going to see what surfaces. And we're going to start looking at the nervous system. And I'm like, nervous system. I'm like, wait a minute. That's another layer of the onion. As I was searching and learning about my biology, learning about my intuition, learning about, psychology, human behavior, really looking at all the layers, I miss the nervous system. And I realized that when I was in survival mode the whole time, because my nervous system was dysregulated. And I didn't know all that stuff was deregulation. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm onto something. Because I knew who I was and what was reacting wasn't me. So I was already upgrading my education, my learning or whatever, but I was like, I'm missing something. And I realized that I was more you could say my flight or fight responses were all over the place, man. They were. And I never, you can say I didn't know what that was until I experienced that. And once we prepared for it, like I said, the hole in the ice was cut. And I remember we got up in the morning and I was just in my head, bro. I was just like, man, you know what? Because I'm not the best swimmer, and I'm thinking about this lake that's cut open. I'm like, is it 4 feet? These guys are like 6 foot tall, man. I'm like 5'5". Like, how deep is this thing? Am I gonna flop in or whatever? So all that stuff's already like going through my head, and I'm like, Eric, you're already overthinking. You're already doing this. So as I was even, as we were doing what we were doing, I started realizing like I was coaching myself through the whole damn time. So everything that I was learning, my tools, meditation, breath work, sitting with myself, just taking time, I was already implementing everything already for that opportunity. And I remember as I went in, I forgot the guy, I forgot his name, but he knows a little bit about Wim Hof. I don't know if you're familiar with Wim Hof.
No.
It's like a breathing technique.
Sure.
It's like Wim Hof training. It like preps your body prior to going to the water. Because I was watching like YouTube videos of people taking like ice plunges, and they were just stuffing themselves in there, flaring their things, or like listening to like music and just trying to like tough it out. And I'm like, well, how is that supposed to recalibrate your nervous system if you're already petered out going into it, right? So we started talking. I'm like, well, we're going to do some breath work. We're going to get the body ready. And when you get in there, you should feel calm. There's no kicking. There's no screaming. You just become with it. And I'm like, I don't quite get it. It's cold. It's 27 degrees, right? So as I was doing the breath work, getting prepped for it, and as I went in and stepped in, man, it just, I don't know, man. When I went in, it was so cold, but it felt like it was hugging me. I don't know. It was a crazy feeling. And as I fully submerged my body into it, and as I was breathing out until my body slowly calmed with the water. And it was so calm, bro. It was like real calm. I felt connected to the earth. I felt connected to the ice around me. And I think at that time, I sat there standing there for about like 2 to 3 minutes, right? Because it's not how long you do it. You're just stress testing your body. And as I kept doing that, I realized I was just I'd done it more than one time. So as I was doing it through the day, I realized my body was what? Adapting. My nervous system was reaching a new baseline. What was unfamiliar is starting to become more familiar. And that's when I started researching about the nervous system, saying that the nervous system doesn't know what's good for you. So when we go on those default settings and we think what we're doing good for ourselves is good, it's not necessarily that. So when we do those good things, it's unfamiliar. So our nervous system saying, alert, alert, alert. But we have to be the commander, the operator of this vessel, saying that, no, thank you for letting me know in a notification, but based off this results, I'm good.
Yeah. But now some leaders listening there, so what can they learn from that experience? So what should they do to get to the level that you're talking about now?
Well, I think a lot of it has to, I feel like depending on where you're at in the world, I feel like sometimes we get in this whole rat race in the material side of things. We're just trying to make things happen, the grind and the hustle. But sometimes those words kind of get blurred and like, whatever do they even mean, right? To the point to where you really have to sit back and reflect. If I get rid of the hustle, the grind, or whatever, who am I, right? Do I trust myself? Do I love myself? Start with those, because there was a time where I was like all about the hustle and the grind, go, trying to make things happen. And I ran into a guy. He was talking about affirmations, positive, positive affirmations about yourself, and I wasn't really into it because I really didn't like people telling me stuff like when I listened to a recording. So he's like, "Well, record your own." I was like, "Well, that's a good idea." So I, got my my thing set up, and I was started recording certain affirmations, and then I realized I had trouble saying certain positive things to myself. I had to say the word, "Hey, you love yourself, and you're gonna find great opportunities or whatever." But when I said, "Do I love myself?" I couldn't even say that word, bro. I was literally going, and I was like, and I felt my body felt weird. I'm like, what? What my body feel weird? Then I went in the mirror and I'm like, Eric, I was like, holy crap, And I remember I was talking to my wife. I'm like, babe, I'm having issues saying I love myself, and she's like, it's just a word, just say it.
Yeah.
Just do your affirmations. Just do it. And I'm like, no, I'm having a deep time really saying affirmations to myself to really uplift me. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, everything that I've gone through, I have to really start looking on what my mind is mentally, psychology. So that's when I started getting into psychology. I started getting into reading a lot of audiobooks like Carl Jung. Another great book is from Dr. David Dr. David Harkins. It's called Power versus Force. And it really started getting in the intric of the entire anatomy in the body. And that's when I'm like, you know what? I have to sit back. I can continue doing work. I can continue doing what I'm doing, but I know that there is a learning curve that I have to learn. And your body tells you, and those quiet whispers and those things, because there's certain words I didn't understand. And they're like, well, look it up, go research it, go figure it out, follow that intuition, follow those breadcrumbs, right? And as I did that, that opened up another opportunity, something more deeper that I need to learn. But this is the thing, as you're learning, fine-tuning, rewiring these things within yourself, you're also applying them in your personal, in your business. Because I realized a lot of things I had going on personally overflowed in my business. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was why I was so happy that you came to the podcast, because many people, they say things out loud, they might read books, but they haven't actually transformed their life with it. So, and you mentioned there a loss of your brother, and I mean, that was a hard loss. And so how can you kind of move forward after something like that? I mean, the grief and everything that you have must have endured that time.
Well, I think when my loss of my little brother was tough because I knew I couldn't change what happened, but I decided how I carry my brother with me and what I can build and what he has taught me. And what I mean by that is that being in the military, I saw a lot of loss, a lot of loss. And that was tough already. And then going out, becoming a civilian, doing what I'm doing. It was my little brother. He was like in his 30s. And he was going through stuff mentally. And I didn't have the language then, so I didn't know how to help him other than what I was taught or whatever in the military. And that's another part that hurt me, because while I was serving, we had issues with suicide, and I was fortunate that I was in positions where I was able to help those situations. So for it to happen to my little brother, it was tough because he was like 15 minutes, 20 minutes down the road. And we knew things were going on. But like I said, at that time, I didn't have the language because I was already going through my own problems.
Yeah.
So when that occurred, it was devastating, man.
Yeah.
I felt, as a big brother, dude, I felt my little brother. You know what I mean? But at the same time, he surfaced some things that I needed to take a look in my own life. because what he did, it is what it is. But I was going through my own mental struggles, and that shed a light of where I was at going on mentally, emotionally, and all that. And I was like, damn, my brother did that, dude. I'm in bad shape too.
Mm.
So from him, it got me to dive into where my mental health was.
Yeah.
Got me to dive into where I'm at now. So he's also a pivotal point of why I do my work too.
Mm. Yeah. I'm very sorry for you that you have had to go through that, and really respect that you can talk about it and teach us others on those grievances that you have had to go through. Um, how how hard was it like to really understand that moment that like you were saying that you need to become a better version of yourself? Was it clear after that, or like how were there any steps that you kind of felt that you need to go through on those moments?
You know what? At that time, it was scary, man, because I was at a point where it was a mess. You feel
Mhm.
like you're all alone. You feel like you're dealing with all these problems yourself. And then you
Yeah.
have a family and you have all this, and you're like, I was this. What's wrong with me now? Am I a washed up veteran? You know what I mean? All this stuff starts playing with you, man. No joke.
Mhm.
And then you got to fight through it. Like, no, I knew who I am,
Mm.
but it wasn't for Christ with me. You know what I mean? I think that helped me on because I
Mm.
feel like I've had visions, I've had dreams, and I felt like it. I felt the calling after that.
Mm.
And when I felt that calling, I kept striving for it. And trust me, man, it felt like hell, man. Like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? But I knew that the more I neglected it was 10 times worse than actually going through the thing,
Mm.
right? Am I going to continue self-sabotaging myself, going through all that stuff, knowing that it's probably not all the best choices, but I kind of know what I need to be doing, but it's so unfamiliar that it scares me, that
Mm.
it feels the same, but I end up choosing that. It
Yeah.
comes down to choice. And
Mm.
I kept choosing me, and I kept choosing that I was enough, and I kept choosing that I am somebody and I am special.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that as well. Yeah. I mean, then we all get into life in the moments where there's pressure and sometimes bad things happen as well. But what's your opinion? How can we kind of prepare and strengthen ourselves before those happen so that we kind of can deal with those tough situations? Maybe not to the
Hmm.
level as losing your brother, but in any ways, we have stressful moments in life. So what's your advice for us that how can we prepare and kind of strengthen our baseline before we kind of hit the moments where are super tough?
Mm. Well, I think depending on your belief, I think that comes down to it too.
Mm.
You have to have hope, and for me, it was Christ consciousness,
Mm.
knowing that we're all interconnected. And I think when I knew I was connected, I knew I was meant for something. I think that was the spark. I always
Mm.
talk about sparking the hearts. I'm always talking about giving that spark to individuals, because I think what individuals need is the spark. Because in the darkness, and
Mm.
being in the military, when you're from a distance and someone lights a cigarette butt, how far
Mm.
you can see that cigarette butt?
Yeah.
Pretty far away, right?
Mm.
So that tells me all we need is a spark.
Yeah.
And when you have that spark in us, and I don't care how dark it gets,
Mm.
you can go back to that little spark you have inside your heart and you just blow on it. And what happens when you blow on the flame? It
Mm.
brightens up. And when you go back to that, you have to really be honest with yourself and tell you the truth
Mm.
and know that you're enough and
Yeah.
continue to be enough. And I think the main thing is too is you're not alone. And I think that's another thing. A lot
Mm.
of us going through, like, we're all trying to figure out ourselves.
Mm.
So if you have people around you, that's always the best, because you want
Mm.
to be a circle where they're going to lift you up,
Mm.
bring you, not just say you're good, you're good, you're good. I don't need people like that around me. I need people like, you're good, but you might need, you know what? Thank you for that reflection. Thank you for that input. Thank you for allowing me to see that where I need to grow. Right.
Mm.
I like to be around people that want to lift each other up. And
Yeah.
I think another thing is to know that you're meant for something special in the world. I think.
Mm.
I
Yeah.
think we all have a message. We all have something that we can offer, and we
Mm.
just got to help that person behind us, man.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and one more other thing
Yeah.
I've learned is I think one of the big pivotal things of me transitioning out of the military and as I was able to filter out the good and the bad and the ugly, was I stopped looking at things as a hierarchy system.
Mm.
We tend to get in the world where we build this hierarchy, and then that's when the competition comes in, and that's where the masks
Mm.
starts coming on,
Mm.
where we're not even being who we are, we're being who everyone thinks we need to be.
Mm.
So I rely on more me versus me.
Okay.
Do what I need to be done in the world,
Mm.
and not wear the masks, not be in this whole
Mm.
art. And I get it. There's the titles, there's the positions. That's
Mm.
awesome, but not in an attachment to where if I lost all that, I'm nobody.
Okay. But how do you get to that level? I mean, that's even frightening to say that you're you versus you. Like,
You know what? I think it's one of those things like in the military, you got to follow the process.
mm.
You have to get through the process. Anything you've done in even martial arts,
Mm.
what you're doing in I remember you talked about the horse stance. Remember the horse stance? You know what
Mm.
I mean?
Mm.
And you did it in a certain amount of minutes, and then it increased and increased and it increased. It's the same metaphor concept, man. The
Mm.
more we do that process, the more we like that resilience, that consistency, that discipline,
Mm.
bringing that leadership. And I talk about self leadership.
Mm.
Be a self leader. You know what I mean? And I think there's different type of leaders. There's leaders
Mm.
that are in front of everybody, but there's other leaders that do lead at one of a time, or leaders that pave a road
Mm.
for people to see what's possible.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. But do you need to go through these hardships to understand that, or is it something that somebody who's listening now can already start themselves?
I would say evaluate where you're at, and then because everyone's at different levels,
Yeah.
and then depending on where your level is at, what do you feel the hardship is from that angle?
Mm.
So if I'm this person in this title in this position, and the hardship is moving into this level or moving
Mm.
into that level, well, that's gonna reveal surface stuff, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Surface are coming up because now you're striving for something that you haven't became
Mm.
familiar with.
Mm.
So no matter like a video game,
Mm.
anytime you level up, you got to gain experience points, buddy.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Like a video game,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And depending on how well you gain experience the points, and after you finish that level, you're either gonna get 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, right?
Yeah.
And then from there, you'll do that AER, which is that after action review, where you
Mm.
assess it. You
Mm.
grab that data, that raw data, then you interpret that data. That gives
Mm.
you clarity, and then you
Mm.
come up with a game plan to move forward. Kind of like football, right? You
Mm.
can't keep doing the same plays over and over and expect a different result.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to change your offense and your defense.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So kind of like, I mean, I remember you were also talking about like how you spoke in your hometown and that was hard. It creates some different pressure for you. You were not comfortable in speaking in front of the audience and especially in your hometown. And so you talked about kind of bringing your upgraded version back. So kind of that you just have to upgrade yourself to be there. So is that the way to go? So that we should kind of put ourselves in those pressure moments and just challenge ourselves a bit more every day to become a better version of ourselves, or
Yeah, and absolutely. And to bring I'm glad you brought up the home thing. That was something totally I didn't expect that.
Hmm.
Because as I did my books and I traveled, I done podcasts, the ice plunge, everything I've done, and they're like, "Hey, you got this thing you got to do in your hometown," and I'm like, "Oh, no big deal." And once I was preparing for it, I was like, "Why am I feeling this stuff again?"
Hmm.
But all the work, all the research, all the training I've done, it gives you blueprints. So
Hmm.
as you progress and as you complete those milestones and you get those goals, remember you have templates,
Hmm.
you have evidence, you have information, you have confirmation. And
Hmm.
those are your cliff notes to go back to it when you enter a situation. And then, okay, what did I learn from these other situations that I can apply to this?
Hmm.
And that's when I realized, why am I feeling this stuff? And then I realized when I grew up wasn't the best. You know, there was a point where I was almost kidnapped. I
Hmm.
was bullied. There was gangs, like
Hmm.
list. But that took a back seat. But it
Hmm.
resurfaced
Hmm.
when I came back. Then I had to face the little kid. I had to face me at that age where that occurred. And
Hmm.
when I got my little self and myself, and I'm like, you know what? I know, I know what happened. I know why
Hmm.
you feel be safe. I
mm,
know why you were going through all this stuff.
mm,
But you see this guy right here? I'm here to protect you.
mm,
And I think from that moment, that's when I realized, like, I'm glad that happened because
mm.
that was like, I say the closing loop, you can say.
Yeah.
Well, so, yeah, it kind of like I went on this journey, whatever, just to meet my little self
Mm,
saying that I did it. Everything I've gone through, I came back and now I'm seeing my little version of myself saying that I got you, little self.
yeah.
You're not the same person that went through it. You're
Yeah.
someone different.
Yeah. 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 But yeah, that's kind of it's a nice learning as well for you personally then to kind of realize that you have actually.
Yeah. And I wouldn't have known it if that didn't occur.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Eric, before we wrap up, so maybe kind of a final question. So what is the one part of your own internal operating system that you are still learning to understand or recalibrate? So what are you working on now?
Man, I'm working on all kinds of stuff. I think I'm really working on the layers. I
Mm,
realize we're onions, so I feel like right now I'm really connecting all the layers together. And
mm,
I'm almost got it on completion, where I'm completing all the layers, where I'm trying to develop more of like a self-diagnostic system,
mm.
like
Okay.
you would do on a vehicle, but it will
Mm,
do on yourself more in a way where it will check your mental state, it will check your emotional state, it'll check your
mm,
nervous system state, right?
mm,
And it already has a blueprint of who you are and what you're about.
mm,
Uh, Later on, like an app or something I'm developing.
mm,
But a lot of my frameworks and my works is going to be evolving, sharing tidbits about that and how
mm.
we can have our own. Because I remember when I was, because you have kids as well, and I remember when my kids were being born,
Mm.
I was talking to other parents. They're like, "Well, they don't got a manual. Kids don't got a manual,"
Yeah.
and I remember that, and I'm like, "Well, why the hell do we don't have a manual?"
Yeah.
And then I started thinking about the military, saying, well, I knew all this stuff. And that's when I started deciding, you know what? I need to build an internal manual where I can have one for my kids, one for my family, to
Mm.
where we can already like have. I'm still working on it. Yeah, I hope
Yeah.
that's enough, but it's just something that I'm working with to really tie everything together and really help people transform.
Mm. Yeah. Appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. But hey, thanks for joining, Eric. And if people now got intrigued about you and your story, so where can they find you and maybe connect with you and yeah, consume your content?
Well, I appreciate you having me on board here at Aslak. It was a great conversation, man, and I can't wait till continue this, man. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, if the listeners, so find the Ignite Resilience. And what was the first book? It was
Ignite your purpose. Yeah, if
Ignite Your
they go to
Purpose.
my Facebook link, they should see my background and they should be
Yeah.
able to see.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But thank you, Eric. It was really insightful conversation. Thanks for sharing openly your story because I mean it's not an easy one and I can just feel for you. So yeah,
I appreciate that, Ashley.
thank you. And thank you for all your listeners and I hope you enjoyed the episode as well. And I invite you to keep on training and unlocking the black belt in leadership within you. Thank you.